Hello and welcome to another standard gameplay video on the official MTG Arena channel. Today we're taking a look at a black-red mid-range deck featuring Invoke Despair alongside the new Capricious Hellraiser, a 6-mana 4/4 flyer that gets a 3-mana discount if we have 9 or more cards in our graveyard, and when it enters we exile 3 cards at random from our graveyard, choose a non-creature non-land card from among them, copy it, and we can cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So the Hellraiser is a pretty interesting build-around card. On the one hand we want to fill the graveyard as quickly as possible to reduce its cost down to just triple red, but on the other hand, if we have a smaller graveyard, we have more accuracy on which card we get to exile with the Hellraiser, to potentially make sure we get back an Invoke Despair, which is of course a very powerful card to cast for free, making the opponent sacrifice a creature, enchantment, and planeswalker, and for each card they cannot sacrifice, they lose 2 life and we get to draw a card. So Invoke Despair is a removal, a win condition, as well as card draw, so it's a perfect card to cast several times. And then looking at the rest of our deck, we've got some cheaper spot removal to stay alive long enough, 3 copies of Cut Down, 3 copies of Go for the Throat, as well as 2 copies of Sheoldred's Edict, shines at dealing with opposing planeswalkers, and then 2 copies of Abrade, which can also tag opposing artifacts or deal 3 to a creature. And then Reckoner Bankbuster also plays well in this kind of more controlling build, where we just want to draw extra cards and eventually overpower other creature strategies. And then at 3 mana we've got a couple sweepers with Brotherhood's End, can deal 3 to each creature and each planeswalker, or potentially destroy artifacts with mana value 3 or less. Doesn't come up as often, mainly here as an answer to the Blue-White Soldiers deck, which tends to go wide with lots of smaller creatures. And then a Fable of the Mirrorbreaker has awesome synergy with our Hellraiser. On the first chapter we get to make a Shaman, can make treasures to help us ramp into the expensive cards. Then on chapter 2 we can discard up to 2, draw that many, so that can fill the graveyard to discount our Hellraiser. And eventually the Reflection of Kiki-Jiki can also copy our Hellraiser to potentially get more cards back from the graveyard. And the more Hellraisers we get in play, of course the smaller our graveyard gets, so then we can potentially just cast a single non-creature spell and be guaranteed to get it back with our Hellraiser. So that's especially powerful with Invoke. And then Graveyard Trespasser is the only creature besides Hellraiser in the deck. Of course we won't be able to cast it for free if we happen to exile it, so that's a bit of a nombo, but there's still a bit of subtle synergy with Trespasser and Hellraiser, because if we have a few cards in our graveyard that we don't want to cast with our Hellraiser, then Trespasser can exile them when it enters or attacks, so that way we can potentially shrink down the size of our graveyard to kind of pinpoint what we get with our Hellraiser, which can also be useful. And of course we can also exile opposing creatures to gain some life back, which can also help out. And then as a 3/3 we can also crew a Reckoner Bankbuster and can just generally play defense, as the opponent's unlikely to want to kill it, as they'll be forced to discard a card to ward. And then at 4 mana we've got more big discard effects, with Big Score discarding to draw 2 and make 2 treasure tokens. So Big Score sets up a Hellraiser on the following turn even if we don't have a full graveyard. And then the Elder Dragon War can start from chapter 1 dealing 2 to each creature and each opponent, so gives us another sweeper against those creature decks, but we can also read ahead and start from chapter 2 if we prefer, discarding any number of cards and then drawing that many, so that's another great way to put a ton of extra cards in the graveyard to discount a Hellraiser. And then eventually we also get a 4/4 Dragon token, which can help close out the game, can maybe even immediately crew a Bankbuster to get in for 4, and then our 4 copies of Invoke and 4 Hellraisers. Now we do have some pretty taxing mana requirements, since we need quadruple black for Invoke Despair, triple red to cast a cheap Hellraiser, so we need a lot of red-black dual lands, but thanks to the new Blackcleave Cliffs we now have 12 red-black duals that can often come into play untapped, and then Proving Ground can also be cycled if we're flooding out a bit, and then just a 1 mountain, 6 swamps, and the channel lands for added interaction. So that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw. Hand seems fine. Can remove an early creature if needed, if not Bankbuster into Trespasser, can even hit for 4 on turn 3. And now we can leave up Cut Down. So nice curve in hand, up against a green-white, typically a creature deck. And a Thalia is going to slow us down, so now we'll have to cut down Thalia. And do I want to go for it now? Yeah, I think so, in case I have a Tyvar stand to protect it. If they play another Thalia, it's not too bad, because then Trespasser is a valid play. Okay, it's going to be a Torrens, which is also worth taking out before it makes any tokens. Could still take a turn off casting a Trespasser, and then next turn Go for the Throat, kills Torrens and maybe something else. At least we can prevent them from attacking. But of course, they could make a few tokens in the process. I think the mana efficiency is still worth it. And then if our opponent goes for a Brutal Cathar, we're not too upset since they'll have to discard to the ward. Okay, Peacekeeper instead. Can name Go for the Throat, which is not bad here, because then if we want to kill Torrents, we won't be able to cast a 2-mana Go for the Throat afterwards. So that is the name. But now Elder Dragon War is an interesting twist. If Torrents attacks alongside Peacekeeper, they will be able to train up to 3 power. So I guess the answer is to Go for the Throat Peacekeeper, which we probably want to do at some point anyway. And then Trespasser could attack, could take a bunch of damage on the way back, and then Dragon War to clean things up. Yeah, I can buy that. I don't expect my opponent to trade if I attack here, so I'm gonna go for it. And even if they do trade, we still have a good late game with Bankbuster drawing. So, best case scenario, opponent plays a bunch of small creatures that die to Dragon War. Sigarda's pretty big. That one will have to go for the throat. Have to kill Sigarda before we can Elder Dragon War, kill all the humans. And then can still play a Bankbuster. Now I might want to keep Trespasser back on defense. And then we can also crew Bankbuster in case we need a 4-4 as opposed to a 3-3. And we're getting close to casting Hellraiser, which gets back a Go for the Throat. Partners. Yeah, that's scary, since that could grow Torrents to let it survive the Elder Dragon War. Although if they plan to train a token, then Bankbuster can still block profitably. So we'll see if Torrents attacks. Okay. So, can block a 3-3, or we can trade for Torrents. I think we block a 3-3. And then now Hellraiser, probably the best play. Go after partners. And then we still have good blocks on Torrents. Alright. So, our play of ignoring Torrents may not have worked out as planned, but I think we're still in a decent spot. At some point I'll play a smaller creature, and then 2 damage is going to line up nicely. Although there's another Peacekeeper, so now they know what's up. Still happy to trade off Hellraiser for a 4-4 Torrents, and Melira can now protect it too. Well, we can still deal with all the tokens. I don't think they'll be attacking, but we'll see. I guess our opponent can get a little bit of damage in. But now if they save Torrents with Melira, it's gonna shrink back down to a 2-2. So then Elder Dragon War would deal with it. So I don't actually think this is a great attack. So block 3-3, trade for Torrents. Melira saves it, but counters are still reset. And now 2 damage looks very good. Alright, and now it's Bankbuster versus Peacekeeper. And still a lot of charge counters to draw. Skrelv can be cut down. Alright, so no need to discard cut down, and then Fable seems like a fine draw. So cut down Mites, play Fable, draw with Bankbuster, end of turn. So we're in a commanding position, although can never be too sure if our opponent top decks another Partners or Sigarda, we could still be in trouble. But nope, opponent concedes. Too much value from the red-black midrange deck. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, and seems fine. Bankbuster has card advantage, and then Elder Dragon War if we need a sweeper against a more aggressive deck. blue-white, but it looks like control. Alright, so Bankbuster into Fable is a nice start. Hopefully find Invoke Despair. Hellraiser would be good. Still gonna play Fable over drawing with Bankbuster. Make them have a counterspell. And then Elder Dragon War. Can discard additional copies to maybe discount a future Hellraiser. Just an augury for now. Does point towards a potential Apparatus deck to discount their big X spells. One card we have to watch out for is Farewell, which can also exile artifacts and enchantments, so that is a reason to draw with the Bankbuster while we can, as opposed to playing a ton of other permanents. I don't mind discarding maybe one Elder Dragon War and a land, and then there's probably no reason to keep Proving Grounds. Found another one, so we'll just play that, attack with a Shaman, and draw with Bankbuster, as opposed to playing Elder Dragon War. Edict answering a Planeswalker could be handy, although they might be on all instants and sorceries instead. Eventually White Sun's Twilight could make a bunch of 1/1 mites that we'll have to sweep up with Elder Dragon War, so that's still a potential consideration. But for now we'll pass. Okay, Union will gain them some life back. The opponent's counter spells include Syncopates, so if we can generate a lot of mana with our Shaman, we can play around it. And there's a Hellraiser. Okay, for now, don't think I'm interested in playing Hellraiser, just gonna maybe play an Elder Dragon War making a 4/4, so I can crew Bankbuster attack, although I may be overextending since we already have a couple creatures in play. So I think we just attack with a Shaman as opposed to attack with Bankbuster, since I don't want to expose it to removal. And then could draw now. And can probably discard Brotherhood's End at some point. Always a balancing act against control decks. I want to apply enough pressure to force them to spend their turn answering the board, but at the same time not overcommit and lose all your cards into a potential sweeper. Blast Zone could eventually be a concern. Okay, so how do we feel now about an Elder Dragon War? Could also Hellraiser and then copy it with Reflection to generate a bit of card advantage. We would first get back an Elder Dragon War, which we could start on Chapter 2, discarding another Elder Dragon War, which we can get back with a copy of Hellraiser. Although I'm just terrified of a Farewell exiling everything next turn. But maybe that's still the move. And then hope to pick up another Hellraiser with all the draw and discard that's going on. So step 1 Hellraiser. Can pay for Syncopates. And can even pay for a Make Disappear. So that happens. Elder Dragon War starts from Chapter 2. That way, if they do cast a board wipe like Depopulate, at least we'll still get the dragon afterwards. And discard Brotherhood's End. Probably one Elder Dragon War can go, and at this point Edict. Keep Abandoned Mire, which can maybe get back Hellraiser if they just destroy the Hellraiser instead of exiling it. And then now if we copy Hellraiser, we're still guaranteed to get back another Elder Dragon War, which can discard a bunch of lands. Now the question is whether I want to attack first to play around a Make Disappear by making a treasure with my Shaman first and then copying Hellraiser, or if we just copy it now to get an extra 4/4 attacker in. Can crew Bankbuster either way. Alright, I guess our opponent concedes, so too much value for the blue-white control deck to overcome, and I guess they must not have had a Farewell in hand. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand seems fine. Got our Brotherhood's End to catch up against an aggressive deck, and then big score into Hellraiser. And then we can kick things off with the Blackleaf Cliffs. Get those in play as soon as possible. Facing white aggro. Can play a tapped Proving Ground now. And we'll see if we need to Brotherhood's End or if we can play a Fable first. Okay, Adversary means I don't mind resetting the board here. And then next turn big score into Hellraiser. Okay, opponent does have the Vindicator sadly, so that one's gonna be a little bit more difficult for us to get rid of, but glad that we didn't wait on the Brotherhood's End. So now probably gonna big score discarding a Springs, and then hopefully find one of our black removal spells to take care of Vindicator. Invoke Despair would be an answer if the opponent doesn't play another creature, but Adversary means that's not gonna work. They did play its second main, so that's interesting. Okay, Edict could get rid of Vindicator if we can deal with Adversary first. And Cut Down, sadly, is not gonna work now that Adversary is a 4-2. So what's our plan? If I go for Hellraiser, then we would get back a big score, which is not quite what we need. Could, of course, just cast an Edict here, and then next turn try and go for Hellraiser, get back Edict, while Cut Down deals with other smaller creatures the opponent might play. And then we can still play a Fable here. That seems fine. So let's do that. And we can do everything at instant speed. Only drawback is if our opponent flashes in like a Wandering Emperor to make a token, they could sacrifice that instead of Adversary, so I think I'm still better off casting the Edict now. Although never mind, I guess Edict makes them sacrifice a non-token, so even the token from Emperor wouldn't work. But probably no downside to doing it now. Okay, Cathar respond with Cut Down, so our token never gets exiled. And hope they don't add another creature to the board. It's gonna be a lay down arms to exile it instead. Okay, that works for me. So now Hellraiser has a pretty good chance of getting back Sheoldred's Edict. So I don't think I'm discarding anything. We'll just keep things as is. And then cast a 6-mana Hellraiser. Okay, did not get Edict, but did get a big score at least. And then discard Trespasser, keep the other Hellraiser, which will be able to get back Edict next turn. So we'll take another hit, although now Guardian can take the hit from the Edict instead. And a Skrelv as well. Alright, could be in a bit of trouble. So Hellraiser, get back Edict, opponent just sacrifices Skrelv now. And then we can block a Guardian, Vindicator still hits us for 5. And then we're gonna have to try and copy Hellraiser to try and take over. And then if I cycle Proving Ground first, there's a chance I don't get rid of Edict and Cut Down, since I only need really one to get rid of Skrelv. So maybe cycling first is better. Okay, and then we'll play Hellraiser. And a Sheoldred's Edict makes him sacrifice a non-token. So opponent actually keeps Skrelv, and then there's no point in me staying back with a Hellraiser. Opponent can just give the Vindicator protection from red to attack past it. So we need a good top deck next turn. I can get back a Cut Down by copying Hellraiser to kill Skrelv, but then Vindicator still kills me. If I block, they just deal 4, so that doesn't help. I Ganja to deal 4 to their own Vindicator. That's a neat play. We'll finish this off. Alright, GG's. Could not quite find an answer to the Vindicator in time. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, and we desperately need a third land. Once we find it, Fable can help hit future land drops, and then of course Invoke into Hellraiser is powerful. It's a bit of a greedy keep, but on the play, so hopefully we don't get punished too badly. This hand's not particularly good against an aggressive deck. Rot Priest, so opponent on poison. Well, still happy to cut it down before they can protect it, even though we take a poison. And then hope for an untapped land next turn. All of them are untapped right now besides Proving Ground. So our opponent a green-white toxic deck. Could also play Trespasser to stem the bleeding, since the Duelist will have a harder time attacking into it. And then next turn Fable. Although Fable can still trade for Duelist. And I might be okay just taking the 2 poison. And we really need to keep hitting lands to cast Invoke Despair. Right, Homestead Courage to pump Duelists, so it can get past our Shaman. Also has Vigilance, so we'll be able to block it. So I wouldn't mind finding a removal for Duelist now. Boseiju to blow up our Fable, but does let us search up a land, including our Proving Ground, which has a basic land types. So that's good mana fixing. Find another Fable. So if I attack with my Shaman, I can Invoke, which seems worth it. Get rid of the Duelist, draw some cards. And hit our land drop for the turn. Okay. So one more land and Hellraiser gets back and Invoke Despair. Homestead Courage, a second Duelist. So just cast another Invoke, keep it simple. There's our land. And Hellraiser still guaranteed to get back an Invoke. And they may concede to a third Invoke on a 2-2 Duelist once again. Best case scenario would leave an Invoke in the graveyard, which we did. Alright, Invoke number 3, back to back to back. Probably should not have played land yet in case we drew tapped Blackleaf Cliffs, but that's fine. And our opponent concedes. Yeah, that was pretty brutal. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, and our hand's a little on the slow side. No cheap spot removal, although we do have an Elder Dragon War, which can potentially deal 2. Although on the draw that may be too slow. So definitely a bit of a greedy keep, but I'll give it a shot. I have quite a few cheaper spells we can draw. And Double Fable also gives us a lot of card selection. Got 3 of them now. Facing mono black aggro with Mishra's Foundry. Okay, so it's gonna be a pretty grindy matchup. The extra red cards should give us a leg up, but opponent on the play with a decent start could apply enough early pressure to still kill us. Our hand's also very weak to a potential Shieldred. Opponent just animating a Mishra's Foundry, so they didn't have a proactive 3-mana play. Alright, play Fable and cross our fingers for no Shieldred, but given their last turn, it seems somewhat likely. It's gonna be a Liliana instead, that we can handle. Kills our Shaman, no doubt.
Happy to help, but I'm taking the credit for you.
So now we can go digging for more lands. And then go for the throw to nice answer to potential Shieldred. Probably discard 1 Fable, and don't know if I really need Elder Dragon War in this matchup. Of course 2 damage could deal with Underdog, but that's not the biggest threat. So big score into Hellraiser could be more powerful. Now we could just play another Fable, or we can big score setting up Invoke and or Hellraiser. I think going for the more mana efficient big score is going to be the move. and then we keep Go for the Throat available if necessary. Although we can always kill a Shieldred in our upkeep before taking a draw step. So do I want a big score now? I guess I do. And what to discard is also an interesting question. Could be the Springs. Even though I wouldn't mind an extra land, we're somewhat likely to find it in 3 draw steps. Alright, another Invoke. So maybe now Fable has to go. Keep all the Invokes and Hellraiser. Go for the Throat as a cheap answer for Shieldred. Path of Peril discarded. So possible they're splashing a bit of white. Good card against the Soldiers deck, of course. And a Sorin. Alright, 2 Planeswalkers for us to deal with. Although we have the tools in hand. Opponent makes a Vampire. Oh man, a Brotherhood's End would be awesome here, wiping the opponent's entire board. Would be our best draw step. A Braid instead. Okay, so probably kick things off with an Invoke Despair. And we'll see if they want to keep Liliana or Sorin. If we get to keep our Reflection, we can potentially copy Hellraiser next turn. Opponent gets rid of Vampire. We draw Shieldred's Edict, so we can also Edict a Planeswalker now if we want to. 5 cards in graveyard. Opponent keeps Sorin. Yeah, interesting whether or not we want to Edict. And then we'll still have Go for the Throat as spot removal. In case of Shieldred and an Invoke Despair to pull ahead. Alright, let's go for it. Just have to make sure we don't die to an opposing Invoke Despair, so don't want to take too much more damage. Sorin down. And we have 7 cards in graveyard. If they kill Reflection, we go up to 8, so then I could cast a 2-mana removal spell, and then still a 3-mana Hellraiser, potentially. Alright, opponent blitzes Underdog to hit us for 6. So if I fall to 3, I would put myself potentially dead to an opposing Invoke Despair. If I take 6, I can play Hellraiser and copy it with Reflection in the near future, although it wouldn't be right away, since we can only cast a 6-mana Hellraiser at the moment, and we only have 5 lands in play. So trading is probably the smarter choice, and then just take 3, fall to 6, hope we can play Hellraiser next turn, so we have a creature we can sack to invoke so we don't just die to it, and take it from there. Alright, another Hellraiser, so I can actually cast it here. So I can invoke, or I can keep up spot removal to potentially kill a blitzed creature or a Mishra's Foundry, but if our opponent just casts an invoke, we're dead. So I think I make the proactive play while I can. Opponent's at 10. Alright, hopefully no land here. There's a land, so we're dead to an opposing invoke, which seems somewhat likely at this point. Nope, just a Sorin. Okay, so we dodged a bullet there.
Out of my way. I have a way.
We can turn the corner pretty quickly with Hellraiser for 3 mana. Once again, Brotherhood's End would have lined up perfectly. So yeah, we're just gonna Hellraiser for 3, hope for the best, and then can still play some removal afterwards. We have double Invoke Despair in the graveyard, so pretty good chance of hitting one of those. Elder Dragon War could also potentially kill Sleeper, and then we can finish off the Vampire. Alright, we got an Invoke. That's gonna be the best one. And then I could play a Bankbuster. I think I'm better off keeping up interaction. So we'll just pass. So now we're not dead on board to an Invoke, since we can sacrifice Hellraiser. Obliterator we can kill pretty easily. So now removal into another Invoke should be game. So we can abrade the Vampire. Possible our opponent has removal for Hellraiser, of course. So let's start by attacking to see if that's the case. Opponent takes 4, and then now Invoke is 4 more damage at least. And there we have it, triple Invoke Despair to beat Mono Black. So yeah, this black-red Hellraiser deck's a lot of fun. Not quite as consistent at playing a 3-mana Hellraiser as the mono-red version that I tried before as well, but getting to cast Invoke Despair is undoubtedly very powerful, especially if you can cast it multiple times. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.